We continue our study of Qohelet, and like I said earlier, I hope that it will encourage more people to study Tanakh. There's so much wisdom, amazing insights in the biblical text, especially in the what is called the wisdom literature, Qohelet, Iyov, Tehillim. So let's go to the text. We are in Qohelet chapter 5. Last week we started looking at the chapter and the discussion of Nedarim, the idea of vows, and to be clearer, I will say that a vow in the biblical terminology is a commitment that usually has to do with bringing a sacrifice, but also could be an action. The rabbis made it a bit more complicated when they tied the neder to some kind of punishment or self-affliction. But in any case, I think that the message of the first 5 verses of chapter 5 of Qohelet is, don't put yourself in a predicament by making promises or vows or oaths or anything of the sort. Instead, what you should do is just do the right thing, do the right action. You could accept it upon yourself, you could make a commitment mentally, and build the habit gradually and slowly, instead of throwing yourself into a situation that eventually will cause you harm, either physically or emotionally. So now we got to verse 6, which is a conclusion of that first paragraph. כי ברוב חלומות והבלים ודברים הרבה, כי את האלוהים ירא. He says, don't let yourself be dragged by dreams and vanities, again, vapor, air, and many words. Rather, revere God. Et Elohim yira, yirat Elokim, meaning the important thing is how you guide your actions. He continues now to a new topic, which is very always relevant, unfortunately. אם עושק רש וגזל משפט וצדק תראה במדינה, אל תטמע, כי גבוה מעל גבוה שומר, וגבוהים, אל תטמע על החפץ, כי גבוה מעל גבוה שומר, וגבוהים עליהם. He says, if you see the oppression of the poor, עם עושק רש, וגזל משפט וצדק, and violent perversion of justice and righteousness, תראה במדינה, you will see in the state, אל תטמע על החפץ, don't be surprised by that matter. Why? כי גבוה מעל גבוה שומר וגבוהים עליהם. This is a verse that my grandfather loved quoting. כי גבוה מעל גבוה שומר וגבוהים עליהם. There is hierarchy. One is higher than the other, and there's someone who's higher than all of them. Meaning, if you see corruption and injustice at the lowest level, then you should assume that this corruption runs all the way up. My grandfather used to tell me a story that comes from, you could say, probably 1,001 Nights, about the Khalif who goes to survey the city, and he wants to take care of his citizens, and he sees that some of the streets are very are not in good shape, and he wants to make sure that the streets are paved well, there's no mud. So he calls his grand vizier, and he gives him a certain, let's say 10,000 dinar, and he says, in a month from now, I want all those streets paved. The wazir puts 5,000 dinar in his pocket, calls the 3 or 4 engineers, and he says, each one of you here's $1,000. I want to make sure dinars. I want to make sure that you pave the streets. Each one of the engineers pockets 500 and shares it on. Eventually, by the time it gets to the street level, the local governor pockets whatever was left from the money, and he calls the residents of the street. He says the sultan, the Khalif, wants to see those streets paved in a month from now, right? So eventually nobody does that. And he said, "This is what who are you going to complain to? Where the chain of command is all corrupt, and you go back and complain to the Khalif." He says, "I don't know. I gave the money. He did the right thing, but he doesn't follow through." He also, again, my grandfather was like a social activist. He fought for the rights of new immigrants in Israel and for people with disabilities. So he cared a lot about these issues. And he used to give me this analogy. He says about corruption. He says, if you choke on a piece of bread, you drink water to pass it down. But what happens when you choke on the water? So, or in other words, as if you're wronged by a low-level official, you could complain to the governor or president or prime minister. But if the or the head of state himself is the one who wrongs you, who are you going to complain to? And the final example that I give of that corruption is, when I started driving in Colombia, in Bogota, my first day of driving in the streets of Bogota, it's not an easy city to drive in. Anyone who drove in South America knows that it's a bit challenging. It's almost as difficult as driving in New York or in Israel, almost. So I'm driving and I made a U-turn in the wrong place. So sure enough, a policeman flags me down. So I had to stop. I pull over, and he tells me that I did an illegal U-turn, and he hands me the clipboard to fill in the my details. So my guy, the Colombian guy, sits next to me. He says, "You have to give him something." So okay, wow, I didn't know that's the system. So I pulled out 1,000 pesos, which is like $1. Then don't blame me. I was young and innocent, and I was afraid to end up charged by the. So I gave him, and he sort of like rejected. Wow, we found an honest policeman, right? My friend tells me you have to do it discreetly. Like, you don't give it like in the open, right? So I put it in the clipboard with my papers and hand it back to him. He looks at it and he's not happy. He comes back to me and he says, "Mi compañera tampoco ha comido hoy." As saying, like, my partner also didn't eat today. So you have to put more money. So I put another 1,000 pesos and he let us go. So that was the first days, like euphoria. Wow, tickets, it doesn't matter. You could get out of anything. But then after a while, you realize that if that was what happened with policemen, if a policeman could be bought for 1,000 pesos, the higher you go up, you just need to pay more money. So 2 or 3 years later, when Pablo Escobar was captured, was in jail, and everybody was sighed a sigh of relief. We're safe. A while later, we heard that he escaped from prison, but he didn't really escape. He walked out. At a certain point, he told the police and the army, "I'm leaving now. Don't come within the next 24 hours. Don't come to the area." And he marched out. So a couple of months later, we were with friends in a restaurant near our house in Bogota, Calle 72, and the following day, a friend comes to us and says, "You know who was eating his dinner a couple of doors down the street? Pablo Escobar." So we don't gain by that. But unfortunately, people look at the immediate gain that they have without seeing how it is going to affect the whole system. And that's also a message that we saw in Bemidbar when we spoke about the first 10 chapters. The Torah presents a beautiful system of government where everybody has a place, everybody has a role, but because individuals want their own benefit, they're willing to topple everything, to destroy the system for their own benefit. But eventually they are harmed as well. So that's something that Qohelet is really concerned about, the ideal form of government. So he says, "Gavoha me'al gavoha shomer ugvohim alehem." When you see corruption at the lowest levels, it means that those above them are also infected. V'yitron eretz bakol hu, Melech lesadeh ne'evad. Says the prophet of the land every way is the king that makes himself servant to the field. It's an enigmatic pasuk in Hebrew, but I think that's the way to read it. Vitron eretz bakolhu. Everybody wants a piece of the land, to the extent that melech lesadeh ne'evad. Another three words that are really very powerful that Qohelet says here. Melech lesadeh ne'evad. The king is a slave of the field. He's a slave of the real estate. Ohev kesef lo yisba kesef. He who loves money would never be satiated or satisfied with it. Umi ohev behamon lo tevuah. And one who likes abundance, the crops will never satisfy him. Gam zeh havel. This is also vanity or vapor. ברבות הטובה רבו אוכליה, ומה כישרון לבעליה כי הם ברבות עיניו. The more you have, the more people will be there to eat it. So what have you gained by it? מתוקה שנת העובד עם מעט ועם הרבה יאכל, והשבע לעשיר איננו מניח לו לישון. So now, this chapter is, like I say, start with nedarim, with vows, but he goes to talk about wealth and the way it is distributed. But we don't know if he goes with Adam Smith or Jeremy Bentham, but he says that when you produce more, doesn't necessarily means abundance and prosperity. It means you produce more, you have a bigger society, and you have more people who need food, and then you have more people who produce food, and then maybe the land, we will fight over land in a way that will lead to disaster. So he says sometimes it's better to have less. And he says this in verse 11, מתוקה שנת העובד עם מעט ועם הרבה יאכל, והשבע לעשיר איננו מניח לו לישון. You work hard and then you have sweet sleep, whether you eat a lot or a little. והשבע לעשיר, but the wealthy person who eats a lot cannot sleep well. Some read it sarcastically as מתוקה שנת העובד, that the second part, that the wealth, the abundance of the wealthy person does not let him, the laborer, the poor person, to sleep. But obviously that's not the intention of Qohelet. And he takes us back to his musings of the beginning of the book, where he says, what's the point of amassing fortunes? He says, Yesh ra'a hola ra'iti tachat hashamesh. I saw this grievous evil under the sun. Riches kept for the owner for his own harm. He would lose that great wealth in a disaster, and when he will have a son, he will have nothing to give that son. And that is also true when people amass great amounts of wealth. For them, the loss of that wealth is much more devastating than people who learn to live in more modest, with more modest means. And he now keeps talking about whatever you have, whatever you're not going to take with you, you will go back naked just as you came. Why would you work so hard? And I'm not reading all of these pesukim. I'm going to verse 17. הנה אשר ראיתי אני, טוב אשר יפה לאכול ולשתות ולראות טובה בכל עמלו שיעמול תחת השמש מספר ימי חייו, אשר נתן לו האלוהים כי הוא חלקו. It says, you know what is good? It's good to eat and drink and enjoy your labor, because this is your share. And you know what? גם כל האדם אשר נתן לו האלוהים עושר ונכסים והשליטו לאכול ממנו ולשאת את חלקו ולשמוח בעמלו, if Hashem gave you wealth and also gave you the possibility to eat from it and to enjoy it and to rejoice in your labor, this is a great gift. כי לא הרבה יזכור את ימי חייו. Not much you're going to remember, כי האלוהים מענה בשמחת ליבו, because the response of God is through the joy of your heart. So I'll pause for a second. See, I would like to hear your comments on this, the second part of chapter 5 in Qohelet, where he starts with, like I said, he starts with the nedarim. He says, don't make vows that will put you in a predicament, and then segues to talk about the curse of wealth. The more you have, the more you want, the more you crave. And the great joy is to enjoy what you have. So it's not about having everything you want, but rather having what you sorry, not having everything you want, but wanting what you have, being happy with what you have. When you're happy with it, when you're satisfied, then your days pass with joy. When you constantly feel that this is not enough, you always look to the next day and say, okay, how can I go? Can I get more of that? And that reminds me of an interesting study that showed that we derive the greatest satisfaction that we derive is from sharing our wealth or our blessings with other people. And maybe that's what he says at the end of the chapter. There's something spiritual with that happiness. So how can you get from material things spiritual happiness? The answer is by sharing it with others. And which is sort of you could say an optical illusion. The way that the experiment was conducted was to prove that point of that sharing with others makes you happier. People were given a certain amount of money at the beginning of the day, and they were also asked to mark their level of happiness from 1 to 10. And they were told what to do with the money. Some people were told to buy something for themselves, and some people were told to buy something for others. And then at the end of the day, they were asked to grade again their happiness, their level of happiness. And it turned out that the people who bought stuff for themselves either remained at the same level of happiness or were below it. And the people who bought stuff for others were happier than they were at the beginning of the day. So why did this happen? Because this is a simplistic explanation. One of the things they were told to buy was a cup of coffee, right? Either for you or for a stranger. When I buy a cup of coffee for myself, I enjoy it, I drink it, and after a couple of hours, I forget it. And think of the best cup of coffee you ever had. Can you say the name and place, a date, or where? Maybe top 5. I cannot recall that. Maybe one cup of coffee I had in the old city in Jerusalem that came with the ice cold water, right? But we forgot those things. But you bought something for someone else, and you just, out of your generosity, you went and you gave it to that person. You will go around for years saying, "Oh, I helped this person. It was amazing. I got that person a cup of coffee." I actually I do remember one time in ShopRite in Brooklyn, I heard that one of the cashiers complaining to the other one that she was on her shift since the morning, and she didn't even have time to get a cup of coffee. So I went to the Dunkin' Donuts over in the store. They spoke in Spanish, so they didn't think that I understand. So I felt even better. Oh, I know exactly what's going on. I got a cup of coffee and I brought it to her. Wow, I was like, okay. For her, this cup of coffee is just like for me, forgetting all the cups of coffees that I had in my life, right? But for me, it's that special moment where I went out of my way and I did something for someone. So that's the way I made it. It's sort of an optical illusion, but it builds up in us. The more you do with what you have for others, the more you accumulate, in a way, things that can never be taken away from you. There's an experience that cannot be taken away, and it makes you happy. And actually, it was also proven with a study that was done with people who won the lottery, a lot of whom became miserable within the year, miserable, suffering, because they didn't know what to do with the newfound wealth. They were trying to keep it away from friends and relatives. But the ones that were the exceptions were people who sat with wealth managers and invested it in charity funds and tried to do as much hesed as they could with those funds, because they understood that at the end of the day, there's a limit to what we can spend on ourselves. What are we going to take from it? So that's how I see this the second part of this chapter. Yes, Israel.
So I talked with a psychiatrist when I was dealing with a tough issue and how I had dealt with it. And how I dealt with it was to be really compassionate and giving and caring. And I didn't ever really understand because I could have felt a lot worse and done a lot worse with it. However, what he told me is really stuck with me. He says altruism is the highest level of coping. It's the highest coping mechanism. And so I think that fits in right here. Whatever's going on in your life, if you have altruistic behavior, it helps you deal with whatever it is, whether you get a lot of money or you only have a piece of bread.
Hmm. Yeah, it's true. I can tell you, I look back sometimes in my life and I say, what really made me happy when I get an email from someone, or that says, uh, what you told me saved my life, or saved my faith, or saved my marriage, and say, wow, okay, this is something I could carry with me. Or there were occasions where someone, came to me and says, what you said on Rosh Hashanah 3 years ago really stuck with me. He says, what did I say? I don't remember. you know, because I give a lot of sermons. He says, no, that particular thing was the right thing in the right place and changed my life. He says, wow, so you're right. It helped through difficult periods, and I think that's what Qohelet is sharing with us here. Um, so let's go to the next chapter. We finished that chapter 5. We're going to go to chapter 6 in Qohelet, which continues the same topic, which could be uh, that originally was not really a new paragraph completely, because this is not the traditional division of the Tanakh, as you know. Uh, but it continues with the same topic. Another evil, you'll have a lot of wealth, but eventually it will be taken by someone else. אם יוליד איש 100 ושנים רבות יחיה, ורב שיהיו ימי שנה ונפשו לא תשבע מן הטובה, וגם קבורה לא הייתה לו, אמרתי טוב ממנו הנפל. כי בהבל בא ובחושך ילך, ובחושך שמו יכוסה. It says, one can have 100 children and live a long life, and can have so much good that, but yet his soul would never be satiated by it. וגם קבורה לא הייתה לו. Moreover, he has no burial. And why is that? Why would that person have no burial? Either because he refuses to accept that he is going to die, or that at the end of all these years, people do not come to his funeral because he's consumed with taking care of himself. In that case, Amarti tov mimenu anafel, a stillbirth, a baby that never merited to survive, is better than him. Because that person came with vanity, or with vapor, with the wind, and goes in darkness. But at least that baby never had to live and suffer, and it's better for him that kind of life than that person. So obviously it's an exaggeration. Anyone who ever, if you know people who lost a child in that manner, it is horrifying. Such a horrible experience. But Qohelet uses an analogy. He doesn't talk about the parent. He talks about the fetus. It's in a way what Eov says. Remember Eov, who says, why was I born to suffer in this world? But Eov focuses on the suffering. Qohelet says, someone who lived well his whole life, he has 100 children, he has great wealth, but he keeps consuming it himself. That person, when maybe that's what he's visualizing, the funeral of that person, people would come, and what are they going to say? Oh, he knew how to enjoy. He knew how to have a good cigar and a good cup of wine. Maybe the 100 children will be there fighting over his wealth. And then he says, Gam kevura lo tiyelo. That's not the respect that one is shown at that. I remember at one funeral, that I attended, where I officiated, one of three sisters, they were all in their 80s back then. Um, they didn't get along very well, and after the burial, we tried to get, we tried to get the other sister to say something good. So um, I remember very well that sentence because it was like one of my congregants, an Iraqi Jew from the Iraqi community of India, and I said, "Do you have something to tell your sister? Like last words." She looks at the grave and she says, "Oh, Florence, you always were very feisty." Those were her last words, and I felt, so this is what you tell, the departure. They all were very well to do, and there was jealousy between them, and that was bad. So the cantor was with me, was from the same community, and he told me, he reminded him a story where at the funeral of a person like that, a very wealthy man that didn't do much hesed in his life, the rabbi was trying to get someone to say a good word. Nobody has anything to say. And the rabbi insisted, he says, someone must have something good to say about him. Eventually, someone gets up and he says, yes, yes, I have something to say. He says, what? He says, I knew his brother, and he was much worse. So I don't know. Maybe this is what Qohelet is saying. That this is the kind of kevura that one does not want. Um,
Rabbi Ovadia, can I
yes, yes,
interject a thought? The whole thing with the Nafel also reminds me of the Gemara of Tov Mishalo Nivra Misha Nivra,
nachon,
which I think is a
nachon.
machloket. Is it better to be born or not? And I think I kind of see the whole book as oscillating between two poles.
Mm-hmm.
Where pole number one is, or maybe, or the fundamental question of the book is life have any worth or purpose?
Right.
And I think what you often see, I think what he oscillates between is life has no worth or purpose. That's sort of pole number one. And pole number two is, but it can be better or worse. In other words, you can make it. It's still sad. There's something tragic about it because the fact we're going to die. But there are very different ways of living, and it can be much better or worse depending on how you live. And even that, he changes because I find the book to be very stream of consciousness, and I think his views, shift over the course of the Sefer. But I think sort of that to me is the essential tension in the book is. Life is we're in a tragic situation. We're all going to die, and the question is there any value or purpose? And so I think he shifts between there's really no value or purpose to you can live better or worse within those constraints.
It's true. I agree with that. Some scholars think that Qohelet is an anthology of different chapters of work of wisdom from the several hundred years, which is a possibility. But even if they could have been put together by one author who's familiar with all of them and keeps thinking about them, because that is something that I mentioned when we several times when we study biblical literature. The amount of literature that existed at the time is significantly smaller than what we have today. Today you'll hear someone, you say, oh, he's influenced by Shakespeare or by Steinbeck or by Bialik or Agnon, whatever. There are vast troves of literature. Back in the day, you lived in Eretz Israel, what you knew mostly was the Tanakh. So you circulate around those issues, and maybe some of the local literature. I would say the totality of literature that was available to people would have been, if you put it in volumes, would be 30, 40, maybe at most 100 volumes that a literate person would be able to read and memorize in his life. So stream of consciousness is pretty accurate, that someone just sits and debates those things. So where do I go? What do I do? We continue again, going back to chapter
Rabbi?
6. Yes.
I also have a sense that there's almost like this reaching for a middle ground. I mean, this presentation of these two extremes it it begs the question. Everybody lives somewhere in the middle, and I have a sense that it's almost like a Zen Buddhist koan, where you end up with this difficult paradox or comparison or something that doesn't seem to make sense in your life, and you have to take that and actually work with it and develop some sort of growth from it.
Yes.
And there are so many here that, you know, we're taking them one after the other as though there was the intention that it be read as a book. And perhaps it was, but I have a sense that each thing is this huge learning exercise, each phrase, each verse, each phrase.
Yes, yes. I don't think that you're right. That's also a possibility. They're not sitting and reading the whole thing, as a Megillah, beginning to end. You discuss a couple of verses, and they could be the same idea from different angles, right? Um, there could be something that the author did over his whole lifetime. Ve'ilu haya, and maybe that's the next pasuk. Ve'ilu haya elef shanim pa'amayim, and had he lived 1,000 years twice, v'tova lo ra, but never had a good moment. Alo el makom echad hakol olech. Eventually, they will end up in the same place. Kol amal ha'adam lefihu, v'gam hanefesh lo timale. Whatever we work or our labor is to feed us. V'hanefesh lo timale, and the appetite will never be quieted. You always want to have more. There's an interesting commentary of the Ben Ish Chai Rabbi Yosef Haim of Baghdad on a Talmudic statement. The Talmud says that the people of Babylonia are fools. Why? They eat bread with bread. So, some people take it literally. My son, when it was when I was maybe 5 years old, he used to put to open a pita and put another pita in it and say, "I'm Iraqi, like I'm Babylonian. I'm eating bread with bread." Well, we used to joke about this. But Rabbi Yosef Haim in his book Ben Yoyada explained this. He says, "What does it mean eating bread with bread?" He says, "You ask someone, why do you work? The answer is to make money. Why do you make money? To buy food. Why do you need food? To have energy. And why do you need energy? To work." So he says, this eating bread with bread, you're eating bread for the purpose of being able to eat more bread. And that's what Qohelet says here. What is the advantage of the wise over the fool? The what does the poor man have that will let him go against life? The poor man also can do that. It's better to see it with your eyes than to just think of it. But he says this is also vanity, or shepherding the wind.
Rabbi.
So whether you have it, yes.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. In verse 4, where it says "Ki bahevel," it kind of alludes. It's kind of sad. Sorry in advance, but it kind of reminds me of, or maybe the author, could draw the attention of the reader to Hevel, the story of Cain and Hevel, and how quick, even though he had all the good intentions in the world, his life was snuffed out so quickly. It's like life is vanity. It's like a mist. It's a little bit sad.
It could be. It could be. I think it's sort of the reverse. That the name of Hevel is symbolic. Hevel means wind or something which is not sustainable, and therefore the author of Bereshit calls the two brothers Hevel and Cain. One, Hevel, means vapor, something that a mist that is driven away. And don't forget, like as you mentioned, Hevel was a Ro'etzon. Hevel is a shepherd. If you look for the first place where the word Re'ut and Hevel appear in the same context, it's about Hevel the shepherd. So Hevel is a shepherd, and uh, the shepherd with the sheep looks at something which is unstable. He doesn't know if it is going to have grazing ground tomorrow. And in my paper on Bereshit, I argue that this was one of the debates between Hevel and Cain. Who's more important in society, the shepherds or the farm dwellers? Cain, on the other hand, comes from the word kana, kinyan, possession, something which is solid, real estate. So yes, there's definitely a connection. Could be that it goes on the other direction, starting from Qohelet and going back to Bereshit. Uh, and then I'm not sure about what the meaning of the second verse, part of verse 8. What does it mean? I'm not really clear on that. It's enigmatic. Ma le'ani yodea la'aloch neged ha'chaim. Is he asking whether the poor man can walk against life, or why is he constantly in a struggle against life? I'm not clear on that. Yes. Shayna, you had the question, or David?
Oh, I was just thinking out loud, actually. But one idea that I've been playing around with, I've kind of put it aside now, but for this definition of Hevel, because I'm not quite satisfied with any of it, even with the Ruach aspect, but it's kind of like elusively paradoxical, because Israel mentioned paradox, and I think that what he's trying to, I really identify with him a lot here in many of his phrases. It seems like he's always trying to struggle to figure out both sides of things. Life doesn't mean anything, but it does. Life is not worth, but it is. Life is hard, but it's wonderful. And that is life. Life is a paradox.
You know who else worked with the same method and became extremely successful? Is the author of the Zohar. One, in my opinion, one of the reasons that the Zohar is so appealing to people, that he takes this idea of the double-sidedness of Qohelet and takes it to an extreme. You read the Zohar, and almost every other phrase is something like that which is known yet unknown, the light which is darkness, the beautiful woman who is always covered and cannot be seen, the concentration of light was the point of darkness. So it constantly puts you in a state of mind of, there's so much to know and I know nothing, and I want to know more. As the pull of the esoteric, of the mystical. But Qohelet does it on a different scale. He says this is sort of the enigma of life itself. You keep asking yourself, what should I do? What is good for me? And maybe, in a way, what he tells us is that the fact that we ask ourselves questions, this is what keeps us moving. I think that to take from another literary text, literary genre, the Haggadah. Hachamim created the four sons, right? Hacham, Rasha, Tam, V'sheno Yodea Lish'ol. And I believe that, even though people put most of the blame on the Rasha, on the wicked person, I think that the really most dangerous, or the one who's most in danger, is the one She'eno Yodea Lish'ol, the one who asks no questions. If you accept everything around you as is, you never ask questions, you're not going to make progress, you're not going to help others, you're not going to change things in this world. So I think that what Qohelet maybe is trying to make us do, he wants us to ask questions. It doesn't necessarily say, follow what I'm saying. Just ask everything you see, challenge everything you know, and maybe you'll find what you want. And
Rabbi,
that will be
how does this relate to the 99% of people who are working, 10, 8, 12 hours a day because they're feeding their family, they're paying rent? Sure, they have leisures and luxuries in life, but, the vast majority of population doesn't work to get the extra million, 10 million, 100 million. They work because they need to put their kids in a school that costs $35,000 a year for Jewish education, and they have no choice. So how does this message relate to the masses?
He's not talking just about wealth. That's why he goes and asks questions like "Ayitron la mina kislut." What is the advantage of being wise or fool or a fool, right? He speaks also about things that are not necessarily physical but abstract. And he wants to know what he's looking for a purpose in life. A person that you describe who grows like that in poverty, they people have their dreams and aspirations to be free. And unfortunately, you're right. A lot of people who are brought up in such conditions give up on life. They say, "Okay, this is my day in, day out. It's only a question of survival," and that's very sad. And I think that's something that everybody in the world should care about. We care about, when you describe people who are struggling to pay 35,000 for Jewish education. Some people live, I think the minimum wage, the annual minimum wage in America is $23,000 a year. Last time I checked, that some people live on that, and then there are countries where people live on $1 a day or less, and they go days without having food or water. So, by the same token, you look at if you look at some of the most successful scientists and entrepreneurs in the United States, they are immigrants who came here because their parents wanted to get out of the situation, and they said, "We want to give you an opportunity." I remember when I lived in Brooklyn, and one year, the yearly report on specialized schools in Brooklyn came out, and people were shocked. So the specialized schools in Brooklyn are private schools. Sorry, not private schools. They are public schools, but they have if you get in, the education is free, but there are rigorous exams to get in. Stuyvesant, Brooklyn Tech, and other schools like that. And how do you get into these schools? So when they surveyed the students who were accepted, they found out that about 50% came from the affluent families of Brooklyn, and some even from Manhattan that could afford private tutors and get their children the best education possible to get them into these schools. And the other half were children of immigrants. In one case, they were, two families, parents and children who lived in one apartment on a salary of $25,000 a year, and from that, they put aside $5,000 for tutors for their child. And you ask them, why are they doing that? I said, because we don't want our children to live through what we lived, right? But they understood that the power there is education and not money. They were not trying to make money. They tried to get their children the best education, because this maybe is the great equalizer that we have today. Everybody can have access to good education, and that's something that maybe is going to change the world. Anyway, I want to go back to the text of Qohelet, and it says, "Ma shehaya כבר נקרא שמו ונודע אשר הוא אדם, ולא יוכל לדין עם שתקיף ממנו. כי יש דברים הרבה מרבים הבל, מה יותר לאדם? כי מה יודע מה טוב לאדם בחיים מספר ימי הבלו, ויעשם קצל, אשר מי יגיד לאדם מה יהיה אחריו תחת השמש." I wanted to read those three psukim together, and here's how I think it should be translated. It says, whatever was already named. It's in a way a reiteration of En Hadash Tachat HaShemesh. Everything already happened. V'noda asher hu adam. And we know who we are. We are humans. V'lo yuchad ladin im shetakif mimenu. We cannot contend with those who are stronger than us. Who is stronger than us? The commentator here is the translation of the JPS is him, which is God. But maybe it talks about death. Death eventually is going to come. Lo yuchal ladin. We cannot cheat death. This has been a pursuit of humanity from its beginning, but we cannot cheat death. כי יש דברים הרבה מרבים הבל, מה יותר לאדם? says there are a lot of things under the world. They're all temporary. They're all going to pass. What else can you get? Can someone tell us what is the best thing you could do in those counted days of vanity or wind that we have? Even if you know what's the best for you, it become your shadow. Why is shadow? This is like, I think it's a beautiful wordplay. It says, what will be after me under the sun? So what will be after me can be understood as a temporal thing, as something that has to do with time, or as a spatial thing, something that has to do with space. So Maya Harai, after I leave this world, what will remain behind? Or when I walk, what is behind me after my shadow? I cast a shadow. we use this term, in a metaphor to cast a giant shadow, but really our shadow does nothing, and that's what Qohelet says. People could tell you what is a great thing that you could do. Who knows what is good for you? We could answer this question now, I think, based on what we read through Qohelet so far. What you could do is make an impact in other people's lives for the better, and let it continue to stream towards others. Chapter 7. I'll read the first two verses. Tov Shem mishemen tov, v'yom hamavet miyom yivaledo. טוב ללכת אל בית אבל, מלכת אל בית משתה, באשר הוא סוף כל האדם, והחי ייתן אל ליבו. The first verse is recited in the memorial services, at least in the Sephardic community. We always use that. We say, Tov Shem, mishemen tov, v'yom hamavet miyom yivaledo. Good ointment, good name is better than good ointment. V'yom hamavet miyom yivaledo, and the day of death than the day of birth. Very, very dark. What he says is that when we are born, we don't know yet what awaits us. When we die, that's it. It's done. Whatever was done was done. It's not going to change. This is obviously a place where he challenges the concept of Olam Haba, but maybe he says even with the idea of Olam Haba that some people have, everybody is there with in essence and the same personality and all, still the world of action has ended. And if you were able to gain Shem, Tov Shem Mishem Tov, then it's good, it's better than the best ointments. Now, what is the concept of Shem and Tov? The ointment is not only pleasure for your body, and it's not just perfume. Today, when we think of perfumes, we think of it as something that adds adds a level of luxury to how we feel. Back in the day, there were people who would apply the ointments with good smell over their body to cover up for bad smells, for lack of good means of hygiene. So the Shem and Tov sometimes tries to cover for flaws of a human being, whereas the Shem Tov, a good name, is something that you could take with you everywhere. Shem Tov. It actually was a common name among Jews, either Shem Tov in Hebrew. Anyone knows now someone called Shem Tov? I know, very common in Israel, and one of the founding...
Yes, Shem Tov we know, Rabbi.
Yeah, okay, I know too. Okay, and one of the founding families of Ashkenazi Jewry came from Italy with the Greek name. His name was Clonimus. It became later a name that many Jews in Europe carried, but originally the meaning of the name was Kalo, which means good in Greek, and Nomus, Kalo Nomus, good name, Shem Tov. So that's the Shem Tov family. Now the idea of Shem Tov is not fame, right? It's not about fame, to be famous, to be a celebrity. Shem Tov means that when people talk of you, they can only say good things. Shem Tov. And that cannot be acquired with hypocrisy. It has to be genuine. Shem Tov has to be genuine. It's someone who acts with towards other people, with intentions, always supportive, always helping. That is a person who has Shem Tov. And why is it good? Because that will remain for eternity. And uh, when you look back, we know that there are people that we look historically at, great scholars, people who did things for society that are amazing, and they are the Shem Tov, and then other people who brought evil and destruction. And when you say their name, you shudder. Then the second part of the pasuk, the second pasuk is something that the rabbis used a lot when giving eulogies, and they say tov. Tov lechet el bet evel milechet el bet mishte. It's better to go to the house of the mourner than to go to the place of festivity. And usually they leave it there. And they say what it means, it's a mitzvah to go and comfort the mourners. But that's not what Qohelet says. There's an end to this pasuk, and we have to look at the end. Like the Gemara always says, Shafil lesefed dekra. You have to look at the end of the pasuk. It says it is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for that is the end of all men, or actually of all humans, and the living will lay it to his heart. Ve'achai yitene libo. You go to a wedding, you go to a festivity, you go to a party, people can talk for days and months about the party was an amazing party. Until when? When do people stop talking about the most fabulous wedding or party that they went to? When the next party comes around and trumps the previous party. Right? And even if it wasn't so good, we're now enjoying this party. Forget about the other party. It's gone already. Right? This is what someone said. Someone who was commenting about media in general. That's the way we live. About TV and honesty in the news or whatever. It says nobody cares what was said on TV a minute ago. We only care about what was said right now. This is like the emet, the truth of the moment. However, when you go to the house of mourning, he says, we start thinking. That's really the purpose of a eulogy, is to tell people about that person who passed away. Hopefully we have good things to say. So they will take it to heart. And a lot of times, people step out, or even myself, when I give a eulogy, and I step out and I say, I wish that when I pass away, someone will say something good about me. So maybe I have to work harder. So that is what Qohelet says. So in that particular pasuk, as dark as it seems, he actually preaches for tikkun olam. He says, Ve'achai yitene libo, because you realize you live in a world that is not infinite. What you do is going to impact the world, and you want to make something, to do something that will really change the world.